Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Bryce Meizen, the owner and CEO of Jidoka LLC. He's a custom software development and AI integration shop based out of Worcester County, Massachusetts, and he's helping hundreds of clients maximize the impact and efficiencies that artificial intelligence and software can have in your business. As an owner and founder himself, he talks a lot about some of the systems he utilizes to scale his business more efficiently. We tie the examples into some real estate clients that he's helping maximize operations from a property management standpoint, and as a real estate agent or loan officer from a sales and lead generation perspective. One of the key features that I really enjoyed talking to Bryce about today was the mindset behind software, how it can play a role in your business, and how to best understand your business so you can seamlessly integrate some of these technologies. And of course, I had to ask the question, are you worried that AI is going to take our jobs? If this is something you want to learn more about, this episode is action-packed and one you definitely don't want to miss. Please join me in welcoming Bryce Meizen to the show.
Appreciate it, Ryan. It's a privilege to be here.
Always excited to talk to you. I know, our conversations, we go all sorts of different directions in entrepreneurship, and I always appreciate your perspective on things because you come from a different mindset than myself. Having understanding software development and AI integration really means you have to understand systems. And being an entrepreneur, I fall victim to the task mindset of here's 80,000 things I have to do. Let me go take them all on, where you might be more systematically approach those. So I'm really excited to dive into it today.
Likewise, should be fruitful. Yeah, appreciate it.
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, tell me a little bit about yourself. And when you say custom software development, what does that mean? What types of projects are you working on? And what made you get into this space?
Yeah, 100%. So custom software development is the epitome to the cookie cutter kind of apps when you can search online and say, hey, I need a platform for this, and it's available for $30. A lot of times, those are solutions that are, as I said, cookie cutter and don't really hit your specific process that your business has. And so that's where we're able to say, here's the custom software approach. We aren't limited by, okay, we need to use this certain platform to connect with this platform. We actually have the ability to say, okay, you're using QuickBooks and Outlook or Gmail. There's no solution out there right now that would integrate two of them, but we could actually connect to QuickBooks and Outlook, and create a trigger or 24/7 monitor your inbox, and based on a new web form submission, kick off a questionnaire that then, once that's filled out, kicks off an e-sign form that then kicks out into a QuickBooks integration where it automatically sends an invoice.
Right, so it allows those to talk to each other and then create automations and workflows off of each other's communication, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I kind of just dove into first example there, but so that's kind of my lens, is I understand what are the time-consuming, repetitive tasks that take up all of your time, and when I sit down with somebody, just grabbing water, grabbing some coffee, I'll say, Monday to Friday, what are the time-consuming tasks that take up your time, and then I'll take my software lens and I'll say, okay, you're doing that manually. You're spending 5, 10, 15 hours a week doing that manually. If I could integrate all these things together and implement some automation there, how much would that be worth to you? And then from there you can move forward. But to answer that beginning question too, around how did I get started in the origin story, the villain origin story.
Yeah, you jumped in at a good time. It's a hot industry. That's what everyone's talking about. So tell me, what made you think about it?
100%. So the AI I've been doing for about 2 years specifically. I originally, we were a custom software development firm specializing in web app and mobile app development, but it was really difficult to try to sell to the small, medium business. And so figured that we'd pivot into the AI space, specializing in building custom AI agents and automation. And my background is, quick story, going into high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to build, exactly what I wanted to do. I ended up taking all the computer electives that I could, and part of that story is I actually would take the textbooks home, handwrite the solutions into my notebook, and then transfer it into the terminal the next day. And I did that for 4 years and ended up, building out websites, and then taught myself how to code using YouTube University and learned the back ends and the database side of things, and then ended up building out mobile apps, one to teach teens financial literacy. And then I realized that I wanted to pivot into the B2B space where I could serve business owners. Within there, I also went to RPI, studied computer science, IT, and business, and then worked for a Fortune 500 company. And I was on the shop floor, and I just saw so much waste. And I was like, pencil and paper.
When you say waste, you say inefficiencies.
Exactly. And that's
tired processes. And just for those who might not understand, that's a nice perspective to have, to be able to point those things out.
100%. Yeah, the time-consuming waste where they're doing pencil paper, multiple touch points, handing off documents, waiting for signature approvals, versus digitizing things and allowing that to free up the time to focus on what truly matters, revenue-generating things, versus being a cost center. And a lot of times, what I noticed with that Fortune 500 company too was they weren't willing to invest into the changes because they're so stagnant, and they've been stuck with the same processes for the past 80 to 100 years that it just doesn't even it's a cost, and it's not worth the investment, versus allowing to help out these small medium businesses. And when I say small, I'm not limiting people to their ability. It's more so maybe it's headcount, and they're growing to mid-market, 20 million and then 120 million and whatever people's goals are. Sure. But it's super nice being able to touch all the different breadths, and not many companies have been bigger than the Fortune 500 one either. So.
No, for sure. And it's hard to have that perspective to really almost at any stage until you have someone show you how to analyze those inefficiencies, because I can tell from my perspective, and we were talking about this before we got on the show, being an entrepreneur, sometimes the things closest to your face are hardest to see. If you asked me what's in my office, I couldn't tell you. But what's out the window, I know exactly what's painting the picture. Yeah. So it's from that perspective too, where you focus on sometimes the wrong things just to continue to scale and move product or move service quickly. But you might not understand that sometimes a solution isn't within the ability to do more tasks with more people. It's systematizing with the people you do have and finding software to help out with that.
100%.
And so what made you take that jump from at that point, you were in B2B, Fortune 500, what made you decide you wanted to open your own shop?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I was interviewing for the leadership program, and I knew that I would hesitate signing the offer letter because I'd always been an entrepreneur. Selling candy in high school, landscape businesses, shoveling snow. When I was younger, we had Radio Shack in a local place went out of business, and me and my dad walked in and we bought an entire wall of things for $5, and then resold everything on eBay. So that entrepreneurial spirit it was living inside of me, and even when I was working for them too. And I looked up when I knew that I would hesitate signing the offer letter, and I realized I could mess up and be 30 and I'll be okay. So might as well go all in. I got no family, no risk right now, so might as well go all in and see where things go.
I love it. And then having that perspective as an entrepreneur yourself, I would imagine it makes your own systems that much more efficient. And I feel like, just from the example I gave a moment ago, like one of the challenges people find is there's too many tools in the store. And I use this example a lot where someone says, okay, you want to build a house, and they drive you to Home Depot and drop you off. In theory, here's everything you need to do to build a house, but there's too many tools, there's too many unknown processes, and I feel like that sometimes happens with AI and software, where people understand that it fundamentally can be beneficial, but they don't know how to frame their minds to be able to see the opportunities. So when you're talking to newer entrepreneurs, really at any stage, but especially in that startup stage, maybe you're a solo shop or you have maybe 10 employees, what type of mindset do you advise them to take to find those inefficiencies where software can help?
The lens, twofold. The lens that I encourage and submit when I sit down is, the first is think about scalability and sellability. In order to, are you building to scale? Are you building to sell? both of those avenues result in, okay, we need systems. We need to be careful of, are we scaling with headcount or are we scaling with, automation and systems? And if we are, realizing that a task is tedious, it may have a lot of reliability on the human, and maybe there's a lot of human error. When it comes to selling a business, say, you want as many systems with standard operating procedures that speaking to the entrepreneurs here, if you were to build to sell or build to scale and get yourself out of the business, you need those processes, and a lot of times automation as a sidekick can help out your team from that side of things.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think from that perspective, it's like the entrepreneur thinks they have systems, but it's all in their head.
Right.
And so I think what you're referring to is taking the systems from your head and actually putting them down on paper to figure out where can software or AI make it more efficient.
100%. And that's sort of the next exercise that I would encourage is, taking a step back, taking a Sunday, that seventh day off, and be able to go into your notebook and just write down what are those time-consuming repetitive tasks that you are having to do and then that your team are having to do. And maybe that's a conversation, a scary conversation that you have to have, and say, hey, Monday to Friday, write down, what does your day look like? Like every 15-minute increments, what are you doing? And then you can really dive into that. And then realize there's also some things there that you didn't write down because they're dopamine hits and they still feel productive, but they aren't as revenue generating as they should be. Write those down as well. And then you sit down, and that's where I come in and I say, okay, actually, this is manual right now. We could take a software lens to that and say, we could integrate these things together. We could build this system out for you. Is that something that would be of interest? But that first mindset shift of, okay, taking a step back, wow, there actually is a lot of manual things, and how can I get this business on autopilot?
Oh, that's a cool perspective to have from both sides. Like I feel like if I was having that conversation with you, I'd be enlightened to understand, wow, I'm not being as efficient as I can. And I know we were talking before this, and it's sometimes adding more fuel to the fire isn't always what's needed in the business, where I think most entrepreneurs default to, like you said, head count. Like, I need more people. Right. It's like, but do you need more people to bring on the team to be equally as efficient? Yeah. Where you could take your team now, optimize the systems, and still have a higher output, which I feel like that's the golden opportunity within software and AI. And so when you're sitting down with someone having that conversation, you're going through their day-to-day repetitive tasks, what is typically your process for recommendation on implementation from kind of two perspectives? We'll start with number one. I'm curious, like, first I would imagine you start with understanding the pain points. And then how do you go from there to then understand, do you need custom software or can you get something off the shelf? Like, how do you walk through that process? 100%.
That's a good one and a question that I hear all the time. So one example is for like a physical therapy place. And even this was actually duly brought up in a financial services business where they were wondering if something could be built to record their discovery calls and their meetings, transcribe everything, and then, trigger and take action based on those meeting notes and have, similar to a doctor, they're taking notes and all that. Can there be some sort of transcribing and verbal recording? And that's an example of something where the technology that it would take to build out my own voice AI, transcriber it would not be worth the investment. And so you're exactly right in that, taking a step back, I understand the A to Z process, what they're looking for. And if there are existing technologies, many have heard of Zapier, Make.com, N8N, and all these different, plug and play that where a bigger custom build out isn't necessary, then I'll lean into that and I'll say, okay, there is a simpler use case or a simpler solution for that use case. Now, that PT example is an example where I would say, okay, now I could connect into the back end once we receive the transcription, then we could trigger anything. Like we could, if there's a meeting note So here's an example. We're getting creative here. Here's an example of an integration that I would be able to do, is taking it from the transcription note, using AI to analyze any maybe dates where they mention a follow-up call is required or a follow-up text, and they say, oh yeah, so perfect, I'll plan to follow up with you in 2 weeks. And their storage system of where the transcriptions are and transcribed notes, there's no call to action. It just kind of sits there and it waits for the business owner, waits for the doctor to be able to act on it.
Like a Google Drive or something like that.
Exactly. And so then from there, I could then connect in some sort of Ring Central or Twilio or some sort of messaging system that would then schedule a call or a follow-up message based on that, and it'll say, hey, last time we connected, you're going to be running a marathon. Let me know how things are progressing. And that entire text system would be built out by us. But that can't be connected. That's not cookie cutter to the voice AI transcription system that already exists.
Right. So your role, and this was kind of the second part of my question originally, was so you help them understand whether or not they might need custom development or off the shelf. So you stand as a consultant in that matter, where your goal is obviously to help them solve the problem, whether that means we grab something off the shelf and then create our own on the back end. Exactly. So you'll kind of advise on both ends.
100%. Yeah, and I come in as that lifelong buddy that it's like, okay, here's your current situation. This is what I would advise. If you need somebody to implement it because you're so busy, I'm here for it.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I would imagine over the last few years, like that landscape of what's available on the open market in terms of already developed products is probably pretty expansive.
100%. And even from a business development standpoint, when we're talking, I have to be careful not to compete with an OpenAI or a Claude. So my solutions need to be, not trying to compete with something that's going to launch or a startup that's backed by the hundreds of billions that they're throwing around.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And so what's, I would say in that regard, like what softwares are you seeing a lot of people taking advantage of, whether it's AI or just in general, software? So if someone's looking to optimize their business, I guess like where do you start from that perspective? What are some tools you're seeing people take advantage of that you might say, hey, well, if you have nothing in place right now, at least maybe check out these couple options?
Yeah, 100%. I love that. And to break that down, I would take it by all the different core functions of the business: sales, marketing, HR, legal, finance, operations. So for sales, obviously you need a CRM of some sort, right? So you've got the HubSpots, and I don't know if I need to drop names, but you've got the HubSpot, you got the Go High Level, and then Salesforce, and depending on what scale you're at, you've got the Zoho, big CRM. And then on the marketing side, maybe you have some sort of auto poster, and then you've got, an auto poster that can auto post to the Facebook for you, and then maybe for content generation. I'm putting everybody out of business right now. all the marketing consultants and the sales consultants out of business.
Secrets,
yeah, exactly.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah. So on the marketing side, there's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all those different Grok, all those different AIs that can be used to generate the content, and then there's Opal and CapCut and all these different platforms that can edit that content. And then there's the distribution side where I touched on, and you can schedule things. And then finance, you've got the QuickBooks, and then you've got ERPs too, as a side note, that can encapsulate everything like that. And so that's really kind of what we're touching on from the software side of things.
What do you mean when you say ERP?
Yeah, so ERP, you see that more at mid-market or larger companies where you have an enterprise resource management software that covers your accounting, it has your project management, it has plans, contacts, it has really everything across all the core functions. It has everything in one place, so you're managing contracts.
It's more of a general dashboard for all of those compartments, is that an accurate way to describe it?
100%. Yeah, so it's rather than having all different softwares for all these different core departments, it's all in one spot.
Oh, very interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. So you would take someone through that process of saying, or someone should take that process of, okay, start with one component. Let's look at sales. Do you have some sort of system? What systems are you using? And go through compartmentally your business to figure out where it makes sense.
100%. And part of that too is understanding what your goals are. Are you building to scale? Are you building to sell? Is this a 5-year or is this a 6-month plan? based on that. If it's like, okay, we're building to sell, we need to get me, the owner, out of the business and put operations on autopilot so that way the evaluation is higher, then okay, we want to think about it from a longer term, larger scale. We'll implement something versus trying to just kind of scrape something together short term.
And I would imagine in that case, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs don't ask themselves that question. It's a hard question to ask, especially at the start where you're like, I just need to make money. But then once you start building revenue, you have to find out that answer, because I would be under the assumption it'd be more valuable to have some proprietary software for an exit. If your goal is to sell your company, that proprietary software has value, which I think a lot of people might not understand initially, that yes, your business is becoming more efficient, but if your goal is to sell it, that directly will increase the value you'll get on the private equity market because you have something proprietary. Is that, do you see that often?
100%. I got to add you to my sales team. So that's what I encourage too in the discovery calls. Listen, it's an asset that has value when you do go and sell. It's like you're building, a lot of times these automations are like 24/7 employees that don't need to go to the bathroom, they don't need breaks, and you're removing the human error. And you're able to touch 7 different platforms and softwares all at once without in seconds instead of hours. And it's really just an asset that can be turned around. And so, that's part of my encouragement too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I feel like a lot of the entrepreneurs on here who listen to this podcast, they're generally real estate focused, but they're looking for that mindset shift to understand these aspects of business, where understanding software can be an asset to your business to create a higher end value, if your goal is to sell. But I also feel like a lot of people are curious now about the direction of AI and, will it replace the general processor? And where do you see the role? I'm curious where you see the role of AI playing in over the next few years. Do you see it still as a long-term facilitator where it's going to help the entrepreneur, it's going to take over processes? Or do you think it could have the capabilities to really take over a lot of the roles that we have today?
It's a good question. So to lay the groundwork, they say we're about 1996 where the internet was, and being able to ride that out with AI.
Crazy analogy, because if you think of the internet in 96, I wasn't even born. I don't think it exists.
Right, right, exactly. It's like, and businesses were saying, okay, we need to adapt to it or fail, and some were saying, no, we're fine, we don't need the internet, and then Blockbuster goes out of business. And in the mom and pop shops that don't adopt to the internet or have a website right now, they can't be found, right? And so it's when you're in a competitive market, it's like, where do I need to be? And then now jumping forward in the AI space, if you have a process or a customer success, process or fulfillment process that could be enhanced and catalyzed by AI, and then you have it but your competitors don't, you're at an advantage. And so that's to lay the groundwork on the first part of the question. And then,
so you feel like there is an avenue where because of where we are today with AI relative to what it could be, that in the future it could replace some processing roles?
It can replace, so side note and side comment is I'm having a lot of conversations with virtual assistant staffing firms right now, where the overseas virtual assistants, they're going to be defunct in 5-10 years, because a lot of those tasks are just tedious and menial, but people were going to headcount instead of AI, that now once it gets to that level that can be trusted and consistent in quality, AI agents will be replacing those virtual agents.
Very interesting. Very interesting, which I'm in the process of hiring another VA now, and you just got me thinking about what core tasks am I asking them to complete. And I do think there's a good portion that could become automated. One of the projects you talked about I thought was really interesting from a different application of AI than I've ever known it to be. I feel like when people think of AI today, they either think of ChatGPT or the frustrating answering machine that a lot of companies have. But a really interesting perspective you had talked about the idea of having an AI agent that you can call into that will get you information about your business, your files, across all your systems. Could you talk a little bit about that application?
100%. And this is going to blow the minds of your listeners that you had said, is that that ideal,
very cool.
that product market fit. So I love this. So think about Jarvis, right, from the movie Iron Man, where
That's what it was.
yeah,
I was blanking on the name.
exactly. Yeah, and so you were able to say, hey, Jarvis, do this, 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 this. So this is what I'm working on for several serial entrepreneurs that have their hands in so many different industries, right there. I'm not going to be able to give examples right now without exposing, what industries they're in, but they got their hands in blue collar business, all these different businesses.
Restaurants, finance, sure.
Exactly. And so, we're actually building out something right now that's considered a Jarvis for them. It's a personal assistant phone number that they're able to call or text into and say, hey, tell me how my top 10 houses are performing for the week. Tell me my profit and loss for the day. Connect into Google Sheets. You just get out of a call or you just close a deal and you say, hey, send a invoice to Ryan Richards with line item, software development, and QuickBooks integration and XYZ. And it auto generates a draft QuickBooks for your, obviously when it gets to that point for that human review. But you're able to touch all your different platforms and it's available just by a phone number or by texting. And then, send me an email notification, send me a text notification at 10 p.m. tonight if I haven't responded to Dorothy, right? It's like, it'll be monitoring your email, and then if you haven't responded, it'll
check for that trigger.
Exactly, and so it'll allow you to prioritize your inbox, inbox triage, and it's really an all-in-one.
And it can cover all software. So you could say, for example, tell me what documents were uploaded in my Google Drive today and give me a high-level summary in 5 sentences. It would do that.
100%.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I think when you told me that story, it gave me a new perception of like the practical use case of AI in some businesses where it's very, very interesting.
100%. Real life Jarvis.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an awesome name. I think that could really go somewhere.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And I would imagine one of the cool parts about AI is that it learns from you. So by implementing that Jarvis, you would imagine, to your point about AIs at 1996 levels, it almost inherently is no matter when we look at the timeline because it still has to learn you, your systems, your application. So in theory, this Jarvis software will get even better and better about understanding how your business operates, your dislikes, your likes, and your systems.
Yeah, 100%. It's about as, it's similar to when you open up a thread in ChatGPT where it remembers corrections and it remembers things. It's that same approach on the back end that we're dealing with when we're tuning and training everything, that it's set up similarly.
That's really cool. And then you can take that Jarvis and integrate other systems off of that.
Exactly. You get another business and you start a YouTube channel and you start asking it, what are my metrics? How many views? How many subs am I at? And you can just continue to grow from there.
Wow, that's very cool. And does that software, does Jarvis in this application, would it potentially have the ability to, I don't know the correct terminology, but push buttons? So if I said, go open up a file in my Google Drive titled this, would it be able to actually go in and open and push directives? Is that an application it could do in theory?
So it's a good question. So from a technical standpoint, we have APIs that we can get behind the scenes and make these queries. I have to manage expectations now,
Sure.
where I have the ability to build bots that get past CAPTCHAs and are able to do the button pushing. But the issue is if, say, the issue that I've run into this year is I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that
Sure.
front. So as soon as I build that out and go live, but then they implement another CAPTCHA to stop that, we now invested in something that can be taken down and blocked immediately. So a lot of the platforms we do a due diligence check before to say, hey, do they allow bots or do they get cracked down on?
So that's when you sign into something, you see that I am not a robot. Is that what that is referencing?
Exactly. And so for the past 5 years or so, I've had some fun, creating a bot to get around that, and we have that. But now when
the I am not a robot.
Exactly. But when your business is now in my hands and you just invested more than 2 pennies into this build out,
Sure.
I want to make sure that you aren't getting blindsided and I'm promising something that couldn't be delivered on. Saying I could auto bet for you in sports, in DraftKings, that wouldn't, because they
wouldn't happen. There's too much regulation. Yeah. So then would it be fair to say that in theory, if you used all of your own custom systems, that application would be 100% possible?
100%.
Very interesting. So you could, and is this something, hypothetically, you could create your own, say, storage platform like a Google Drive or storage, iCloud, whatever the case, storage place, and then integrate all of your own systems, your own CRM, your own, lead generation, your own finance applications, that's all custom, to then implement Jarvis on top of, where it could basically, run your operations. It could function through the business like you with a mouse.
100%. That's a monolith or conglomerate, but absolutely, that's all possible.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's cool to talk about the extremes, because I think when you're early on in a software development or just a new discovery in general, the extremes at some point will probably become reality. Just like the internet. When Mark Cuban started his internet streaming company, everyone said, you're streaming, basketball games on the internet? And now cable doesn't exist, really. Everyone uses Wi-Fi TV. So I think the extremes are certainly possible, but it's hard to conceptualize today.
Yeah, that's huge. And it's even similar to Henry Ford, right? Before he made the car, you'd ask people, how do you want to move faster? What would you do? And they say, I want a faster horse. But then the car was invented, and it's like, oh, we could have just done that. And so AI is the car in this case that'll just, 100x the horsepower, right?
That's really cool. That's really cool. And from your perspective, so obviously you're consulting businesses on this whole topic, how to become more efficient, when it makes sense to go custom or off the shelf, and really just use software in the day-to-day. What would your advice be to someone who said, hey, well, I tried XYZ software, but it was too much of an overhaul of my business. I had to completely change my systems. How would you help them work through where to start if they've tried some software, but they haven't had the best luck? What would your thought process be for them to understand? Is it something that they're doing on the onboarding process? Maybe they're thinking about the wrong things, identifying the wrong problems. Because I'll give you an example. For me, one of the issues that I was having recently is I ran out of time in my business. Similar to this Jarvis example, I have a few different things going on, and I ran out of time. So the first thing I thought of was, well, let me see if I can get a software to take over my entire inbound lead generation system. But that for me was way too much of an overhaul, because I wasn't ready to take that step. I don't even know what my process was. So I then had to take a step back and say, okay, well, what does my sales process look like now? And I'm starting back with just one simple step of, let me take away that initial phone call. How do I optimize that initial interaction? So I actually went a step further. Let me create a custom Calendly link to automate at least that initial operation. So I get initial form submitted. There's follow-up emails automated off that Calendly link. That to me was a first great step, saved me maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes. But I feel so much better starting there than if I just tried to overhaul my whole system. So what advice would you have for someone who's in that same spot where they're like, I tried stuff, but I get overwhelmed, I don't know how to integrate it, and how does your team fill that gap?
Yeah, 100%. So I use that same language around A to Z. So understanding the beginning to end. And that's a good example, starting with a Calendly link. Do you have one right now? And if not, and we'll make sure that that's important, is making sure that we aren't putting a Band-Aid over something that needs
surgery.
Exactly. And so that's a good example.
You gave the example of the compartments, which I think is really helpful. But then how do you help people understand where to start within a compartment? Might be a better way to rephrase it, where if you said, okay, let's take a look at your sales department today. How do they understand? Obviously, you gave the example of writing down all your tasks, but where should they start? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where do they start? It's kind of the question.
So it's a good example. I'm going to speak to one example that I worked with this past week that what we had to do is, so we understood the different core departments, right? And we wanted to focus on maintenance. How can we help out the fulfillment of tickets that are inbound from tenants? They need a plumber, their toilet, or their pipe, or whatever that is. And right now there's a process that is written down with an SOP. So that's a good place to start. Some businesses don't even have SOPs. I'd say, okay, so in your day-to-day, you have processes, and we did speak to tasks earlier. You have processes. Do you have this process documented? And when you're writing it down and creating that SOP, creating that standard operating procedure, you may realize that you have 7 different touch points. You are sending this delivery or this box or this sheet of paper 7 different places, potentially, instead of sending 7. And that right there, we pause and we say, okay, there's actually something that we could do to enhance this and streamline this. Instead of having to send 7 emails, maybe we have some sort of one-stop shop or Dropbox where everybody can come in and e-sign. And instead of me saying, oh, let's just throw AI at this, it's wait a minute, okay, is it possible? Would you be opposed to implementing some e-sign here? And that actually would digitize and make sure that you don't need to wait for people to scan in your documents into their at their home if they don't have a printer or a scanner or whatever. And so once we understand that A to Z, and even I submit that to you and encourage that on your side too, is that A to Z, if you're realizing that there's different integrations using many different platforms, is there an easier way? And it's tough to articulate what goes on in my mind
Sure.
than just saying do it.
Yeah, no, but that's a good framework, because I think that helps people understand. Start with you mentioned earlier, your tasks. So what do you do throughout the day? Every 15 minutes, write down what you do. And then I think the second part of the framework is what you just mentioned, which is take those tasks that you wrote and write down your process to complete the task, which I think, to your point, many entrepreneurs don't have SOPs, especially if you're a solopreneur. I mean, why write something down just for you to do it yourself, But I think having that scale mindset is really important, because it's so much easier to do it from day one than it is to start at, year 5 and backtrack, because there's so many processes that you have to go through that you should have been doing all along. So something I do that is preparing me for hopefully the future, which is scale and hopefully other companies, sales and exits, is start the SOPs now. Yeah. So if there's a new task I take on, I'm not going to sit here and say I do it every single time, but I'm getting better at creating SOPs for some of those mundane tasks earlier, so that when I do want to integrate software in the future, it's an easier transition.
100%. And to give you that lens around because a lot of people may be wondering right now, what does an SOP need to look like in order to bring AI into the mix? What I would encourage on this front is create SOPs, create standard operating procedures as if you're handing off to an intern, as if you're going to be paying somebody $10 an hour or what are we at now? $15.50 an hour, and having somebody that's in school still learning, that can take it on while you're on vacation.
And not call you.
Not call you, exactly. And then once that's recorded, then you can say, okay, now we'll bring in AI and train it on this material, allow it to go A to Z, and it also has a PhD in every subject, and it doesn't, it doesn't need to have that waste there. But
to tire you with questions. Yeah,
exactly.
No, that's I think important for people to understand, because it's difficult to write an SOP. Like when you first start and you're figuring out what does that look like, what does it mean. Your first version is almost laughably simplistic once you really then go back and edit it again and again. And I actually did this process with my intern. I brought him on, and part of his goal was to help with certain tasks in property management, on the mortgage origination side, and real estate acquisitions. And my initial process was come with me to do the task. Get in the car, we'll go do this thing. I'll show you how to do it. When you get back to your desk, write an SOP. And it was funny where you start with that simple first draft. Every first draft is, right? That's why pencils have erasers. But we started with that first draft, and one of the examples we had was he was writing an SOP for meeting a new tenant at a property to give them a tour. And it was funny where one of the SOPs he wrote had basically 5 steps and 5, procedures, if you will. So it was get to the property, unlock the door, turn the lights on. And I said, that was step 1. And I said, well, I think we should start further back. Should you confirm a day or 2 before that the tenant's still attending? Should you text them in the morning? What should the text say? What happens if they don't answer? Well, we want to put language in the first text that says, hey, if you don't answer this confirmation, we're not going to be there by X time. So we got more specific on the procedure so that someone, like you said, who doesn't know the business could jump in and do the task.
That's good.
And a similar question I asked him was, get to the property. What time? 5 minutes before the appointment? 10 minutes before the appointment? What if the lights don't work? So we want to really dig into these processes. Should you let the tenant know, hey, by the way, I'll be there at X time. Tenant, show and confirm for this time. We'll be out by X. I'll confirm. I'll lock the doors. I'll shut the lights off. I'll let you know we're out.
Yeah.
That's a better process than get to the property and lock the door. Now we just added in all these, minute tasks that are really important to the process.
100%. And that's what you just described there, and I love this, is you just described everything that's in your mind,
Exactly.
but is not in his. But as you understand not just this A to Z process of go to the tenant and visit them, but you understand from the business standpoint the customer success that's required. Okay, your experience, I've had no-shows before. That part of my process is making sure that we follow up. And so that's why that's important as a business owner, is to start documenting those. And so that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I think what you said is hit the nail on the head with it's taking everything in your brain and putting it on paper. Because to explain the process simplistically, you unlock the door, you turn the lights on, you go back home, you review the application, but there's so many little steps in between that you inherently know that someone else wouldn't be able to pick up on without you telling them. So I think it's a really good exercise. And I think through that process, whether you integrate software or not, you fundamentally improve the process because you find the missing inefficiencies or the missing value add benefits, where once you actually take the time to write it out to a T, you fill in the gaps and you make sure that process is followed every time. Right. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Founder.
No, not The Founder.
Excellent movie about the McDonald's founders.
Okay, no.
You would love
just
that
the
movie.
Facebook one, okay.
You would love that movie. So it's about the founders of McDonald's, and they talk through that exact process. I mean, McDonald's fundamentally, yes, they sell burgers, but they're practically speaking a real estate company that mastered efficiency. So they go through the example of the McDonald's kitchen. And I've actually never seen it, but the McDonald's franchisee handbook, I think, is like 1,000 pages of processes and procedures. So when they were making that initial process, which ultimately that's what led McDonald's to fame, was the fact that you could walk up to the counter, order a cheeseburger, and get it before you pay because of the efficiency in the kitchen. And they actually drew on a basketball court a chalk outline of the kitchen, the two brothers. And they went through and they would practice every movement. So burger gets prepared, where does the burger go? Onto a tray. What's the turning radius of the person on the tray? And where can we get it so it's one movement to the next person? So they can go back to their station without having to turn around or walk around the kitchen. And they redesigned the fast food kitchen. So it's really interesting where you would think, make a burger. It's like, anyone can make a cheeseburger. But to make it for a scalable and sellable process, it's so much different, where now the location of your cheeseburger relative to the grill and the ketchup matters. How do you know how much ketchup to put? Well, let's make an automatic dispenser that dispenses the perfect amount. So it's like that whole continuation of a thought is, I think, really interesting.
I love it. That's so cool.
You would love that movie. You should check it out.
100%.
Mind blown. So on this topic, what are some common inefficiencies that you see entrepreneurs taking today that they can automate? Is there a common theme as far as some general tasks that you think are outdated? I know we talked about some framework, how to identify them, but what are some of the things you feel like are most commonly occurring as far as inefficiencies that you can help out with AI or software?
Yeah, 100%. Just channeling through my portfolio of like 250 different apps right now. So quoting and invoicing is a pain. I know even from my side of things, when I was originally starting out, sending out the invoices on the first of the month, and it, there eventually was more than one. So it was eventually at volume, I had to send out 20 to 30 invoices. And so that's where a software would need to be needed to, such as QuickBooks or whatever is used to automatically send those invoices. Obviously, and Jidoka is Japanese for automation with human touch, because there still needs to be that verification, that human verification right now, to make sure that the line items on the invoices look good and everything like that. So that's one example there. And that can be, and to take it to that next level and to prove what's possible, is even that QuickBooks piece or that invoice integration can be attached to an e-sign, right? So another one is like, are you sending documents over email and have to send an attachment? Let's use a Panda Doc, a DocuSign. I should get sponsored by them.
I was going to say, yeah.
And then create a trigger based on, once that's filled out, great, let's send over an invoice. Okay, invoice is paid, let's kick off project number one. Let's notify my project manager. And that's where, the creative juices start to flow.
And I think, talk me through that if you could a little bit, as far as, because I think sometimes when people, again, they hear certain software, especially certain names, they think of a very simplistic view. So when you say prepare a quote, I think most people probably start with essentially a blank template. And they're actually inputting every single line item, cost, unit count to create the end number. But talk me through how you're able to change that process to be more efficient. Because I know we've had this conversation before about some of the things you're able to do to source material pricing and create almost like a standard job template that fills in a lot of those blanks quicker. Mm-hmm. So give some context to that if you could, for people to conceptualize.
100%. So one example that I can give is for a moving company that's local to here. Before they talked with me, they were manually, they would receive a website form submission, and then they'd manually send over a questionnaire and say, hey, can you let me know what items you are thinking of moving? And then from there, they'd go to their quote creation software, and they'd be like, okay, it'll be this item, this item, this item, this date. And then they're manually creating their quotes. By the end of the day, they'd be 15 quotes open and still untouched. So what we went live with in November here is we are monitoring their inbox for a website form submission. We then grab that email and automatically send over a questionnaire and say, hey, thanks for filling out the form, fill out this questionnaire. We also ping the internal team, the moving company, to give them a call at the same time and say, hey, received your website form submission. We just sent over a questionnaire. Let me know if you need any help filling that out. I could fill it out with you here if needed. Once that questionnaire is filled out, that then goes into our system, and we use AI to analyze all those different entries in the questionnaire to then autofill and pre-fill the quoting software for them. So then there's a draft quote created with all the line items that from their free text input in the form in the questionnaire. We then matched it with the inventory that is saved within the mover's inventory. And, small table is matched with table, pool table is matched with pool table, and
to get the pricing automatically.
Exactly, and we're able to use the AI context. So if there is a typo, or if there is something that isn't exact, word for word or letter by letter, it's as if you're typing it into ChatGPT and it autocorrects it for you, the spelling. And so, from A to Z, we're saving them and we're generating quotes in seconds instead of hours. And so to finish that example is now a quote is drafted and ready to be sent after one quick human review can look it over and then send it, instead of them spending hours trying to place everything from that response into the quote.
That's really cool.
That's one example there.
That's really cool. I love that use case. I think it's, for me, I'm as much excited about like understanding more of how to utilize these types of systems than I would say. I don't want to say about the core of my business. I love my business, but I think understanding how to bottle this up and use it for myself. I think there's so many cool applications. But like you said, I like how you still incorporate the human touch. I think some people get scared about that, where they're like, I don't want to completely rely on AI because I don't trust it or whatever the case. But it's the idea, really, from what Jidoka was founded on, is still a human touch on everything you do. It might do 85% of the work. Yeah. The last 15 is you to bless it and then send it out.
100%.
Yeah, I think that's a nice application for it.
I love that. Yeah, and you can start with internal tasks if there's some hesitancy there of, I don't want it to talk to my customers for me. And that, that's one of those things, especially in the real estate market, is I feel and have seen that I think the sales piece of it and the communication and the customer facing side of it will really never be automated, because even, you see the influx of telemarketers years ago and today, there'll be an influx of automated robocallers with outbound AI callers, and you'll hang up as soon as you hear it. You'll be refreshed and you'll feel at ease as soon as you hear a human's voice, and you're like, okay.
Oh, so, thank God.
Exactly. Naturally. Exactly. And so that piece of it, and even on the real estate side, is going to continue to be customer facing. And speaking to that last part around hesitancies around AI and is it going to replace you? You probably, and many have probably heard Jensen Huang from NVIDIA say, AI won't replace you, but people who know how to use AI will replace you if you don't. And so,
I've heard that.
Yeah, 100%. And so that lens on it is, and here's a nugget too that can be cropped too, is when people are coming out of college and starting to apply for jobs, you now have the same skill sets that AI can do and your peers. But what I'd encourage and what will separate you is having a resume and all these line items of these different AIs that you know how to use. So when you're applying for a marketing role, you aren't just applying as a marketing director or intro to marketing or whatever, but you are applying with an entire team and suite of AI behind you of, hey, we can handle your content capture, creation, and distribution for you because I'm fluent in all these different applications.
Wow. That's powerful. Yeah, that's very powerful.
So
I know when I'm sorting through my VA applications, that's one critical piece I'm looking for is, and I think it's funny in that respect too, because like the old school mentality would say, well, then you're not really doing the work in some, some old school capacity. But I think the new framework is, if I see, for example, the VA applies with, I'm very versed in ChatGPT, and Trello and ClickUp, Asana, whatever the case may be, some of those automated workflow managers, I'm instantly more drawn to them because they're fundamentally focused on being more efficient. Like if they understand how to use those, they should be more efficient than someone who doesn't. Right. And I'd rather be able to pay them the same or even more than someone who doesn't understand those softwares because they're that much more efficient. And if I can get a higher output out of the man hours because they're fluent in software, I mean, to me, that's a much better hire. Exactly.
And that last piece there just lit up some light bulbs inside too, is because, and maybe this will change the way that society is too, but you're being hired based on the value that you can provide. Like if you are results driven and you can, churn and turn ROI for the business, you are just naturally valuable to the business, more valuable. And so instead of being, okay, it's only going to take me, and that actually, it's similar to like the post office routes or trash routes where they get 8 hours to do it. But if they're able to do it in 2, their day's over. It's the same thing when you're applying for a job and you're in the career ladder. If you're able to provide so much value and you just become 100x, 10x, even in the software space, finding a 10x engineer or 100x engineer, you're that much valuable. You'll then be compensated if that's important to you. You'll then be compensated.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's a really, really great point. I think more people who are listening to this should definitely grasp onto that. I think I hadn't really come front of mind until you said that, and I realized that I was already operating under a similar framework where that's a value add to me as a company owner because of your efficiency and your output. It makes you more valuable. But I think in that same vein, And in one of the last questions we'll talk about here, there is a concern that some have about the impact of AI on the human brain development process in terms of sourcing information, analyzing, problem solving. I mean, all the things that we do as humans that other things typically can't. So I want to pose that question to you around the fear concept, because I think, as I'm sure you see online, that's a big question. And one of I don't know who said it, but it might have been the CEO of NVIDIA. I'll have to find the quote and see. But one of his biggest fears was that, or potential concerns, is that AI could undermine the ability for humans to problem solve on their own. And then it becomes to a point at which we're relying on the AI to solve AI problems, which is a really interesting concept. So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, we just passed Halloween. So tell me, what are some fears you have about AI in the future? Is there anything that you would advise humanity to be careful of?
I love it.
From your perspective?
Yeah.
Well, I'm no Jensen Huang, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, the idea of a muscle that's never worked just continues to grow weak. Your brain, if it's not tested, will just become useless, right? And that's why you want to continue to read books and everything as you grow older, and exercise too. It's that same way. I think 100% you're right. It's that same, if you remember anything from math class. You don't, because you have a calculator now. So it's that same thing where you need the problem solving ability in order to understand what AI is doing, and you still need to have that skill set to problem solve. In the math context, math class, you understand geometry, algebra, calculus, and you go through the different steps. Then eventually you get told when you enter the real world that there's a calculator that does this. And so, but then, maybe you have kids and you need to learn second grade math again too, so that you can help them with the homework. And that's something that I'm an advocate for, is that lifelong learning. And so that's an example there where that would work. But with the AI, if you stop stimulating your brain, there is a problem there. So I would advise against relying on it 100%.
Still being an independent thinker.
100%.
Yeah.
Because it won't replace. Here's a good nugget too, is it's mimicking. It's not going to replace human creativity. It's mimicking what already exists out there. And so it will show great results. You could, build $1 million business based on the strategy and the ideas, but it still won't have that human, obviously emotion, but it won't have that human creativity that's just unique. And if you want to put faith involved into here, it's like that. Whatever's giving each and every one of us that unique touch and value inside of us, AI doesn't have that.
Very interesting. I like that perspective, because it makes me think about the idea of relying on AI for the initial thought, which for me, fundamentally, I still challenge myself to have the initial thought, but then use AI to refine. So I might be able to say, okay, here's a brainstorm of 4 different topic ideas that I would like to present on. Send it to AI to say, give me an idea on flow or processes and procedures, because that's more mundane, repetitive. But I still want to be the idea generator. And I think that's an interesting framework to take. So
100%.
Awesome. Well, we're wrapping up here at the end. I always ask the ending question on any podcast: what would be your recommendation in terms of resources or next steps to take if someone wants to learn more about AI? Would you recommend maybe specific softwares, or would there be a certain resource, whether it's a podcast, website, a book, that someone who wants to learn more about it can turn to?
Yeah, 100%. Learn more about how to use it. OpenAI has some nice publicly available and free course and curriculum around how to best utilize ChatGPT, and I think we had talked about this previously, a couple weeks ago, around there's certain secrets and hacks for the best way to prompt. Quick, out of this podcast, do a quick search and look up around what are some ChatGPT hacks and shortcuts, and there will be a list of shortcuts that pop up that will allow you to really just take your prompts to the next level, turn it into kind of a sidekick instead of always wrestling with it back and forth. No, that's not what I meant. And so there is an influx of material out there right now, YouTube, Google. So it's really, I encourage it all, really.
I definitely encourage that. The last piece you mentioned, because I've heard you talk about it and I've done some of the things you recommend as far as training the responses based on prompts and certain materials you wanted to reference, or kind of giving it guidelines, which is a really cool application for it.
100%.
So I will also drop, of course, all of your contact information in the show. So check out the notes if you want to get in touch with Bryce. But Bryce, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, and happy to grab some coffee with anybody that reaches out, and to you as well. We'll talk soon.
Awesome. Appreciate it.